My name is not important. My story is. I want to take you back to a single night, a long time ago. A night in the year 1983. The world was a different place then. It was a world divided in two, a world holding its breath. It was the time of the Cold War. I was an officer in the Soviet military, but I was not a soldier who fought on battlefields with a gun. My battlefield was a room deep underground, a secret bunker, a place that did not officially exist. This room was the nerve center of my country's defense system. It was my job to watch the sky, not with my eyes, but with technology. I was the man who would know first if the unthinkable happened. I was the man who would know if the bombs were coming. The bunker was always cold. It was a world of concrete, steel, and the constant low hum of computers. On the main wall, a giant map of the world was lit up with small green lights. Each light was a symbol of peace, a sign that everything was normal. My job, and the job of the men under my command, was to watch for a change from green to red. The protocol was simple. The protocol was absolute. If our early warning satellite system detected a missile launch from the United States, we had to follow a strict set of steps. We had to verify the threat. We had to confirm its trajectory. And then I had to make a phone call. There was a special red telephone on my desk. It connected directly to my superiors, to the high command of the Soviet military. My message to them would trigger our country's response, a full-scale nuclear counterattack, a response that would mean the end of the world as we knew it. Every day we trained for this moment. We practiced the steps. We memorized the codes. We knew the protocol by heart. But you are never truly ready for the end of the world.
That night was like any other. The air in the bunker was stale, thick with the smell of old electronics and strong black coffee. The men at their consoles were quiet, their faces lit by the green glow of their screens. It was after midnight. The world above us was sleeping, but in our concrete world, we were always awake. We were the guardians. I remember walking around the room, checking the systems. Everything was green. Everything was quiet. I sat down at my desk. I took a sip of my cold coffee. The silence in the bunker was heavy. It was a silence filled with immense, unspoken pressure. We all knew that our quiet night could be shattered in an instant. And then it was a siren. It was not a loud, screaming siren. It was a high, piercing electronic tone, a sound designed to cut through everything, to grab your complete attention. Every head in the room snapped up. Every man looked at his console, and then at me. On the main screen in front of me, a single word was flashing in bright, angry red letters. Launch. My heart stopped. The blood in my veins turned to ice. For a moment, I could not breathe. This was it. The moment we had trained for. The moment we all prayed would never come. The system showed one missile, launched from a base in America. Its trajectory was clear. It was heading towards us. My training took over. My voice was calm, but my hands were shaking. "Report," I said to the man at the satellite console. "Confirmed, Comrade Lieutenant Colonel," he said, his voice trembling. "The system confirms a launch. Reliability highest." Highest reliability. That meant the computer was certain. It was not a glitch. It was real. My duty was clear. I had to pick up the red telephone. I had to report a nuclear attack. But as I reached for the phone, another siren started, and another, and another. The screen flashed again, launch. Then again, launch. 2 missiles, 3, 4, 5. The room was filled with the sound of alarms. The big map on the wall was no longer calm and green. 5 red lines were moving across the map, like 5 fingers of death reaching for our homeland. The men in the room were looking at me. Their faces were white with fear. They were soldiers. They were trained to obey. They were waiting for my command. My mind was racing. Protocol. I had to follow protocol. Verify, report, retaliate. But something was wrong. Something felt wrong.
A voice in my head, a small, quiet voice, whispered to me, 5 missiles. A first strike from the United States, the beginning of a nuclear war with only 5 missiles? It made no sense. It was illogical. A real attack would be massive. Hundreds of missiles launched at once, from the land, from the sea, from the air. An attack designed to completely destroy our ability to fight back. Not 5. Never just 5. "What is the ground radar status?" I asked. Our ground-based radar was our second line of detection. It could not see the missiles yet. They were too far away. "No confirmation from ground radar, Comrade Lieutenant Colonel," a voice said. "It is too early." Of course it was too early. We had to trust the satellite. The satellite that the system said was completely reliable. I looked at the screen. The 5 red lines moved slowly, steadily. The alarms continued to scream. Everyone was waiting. The world was waiting. My hand was on the red telephone. I could feel the cold plastic under my sweaty palm. I had to make a choice. Choice 1. I follow the protocol. I trust the machine. I report the attack. In a few minutes, our own missiles would be in the air. The war would begin. Millions would die in the first hour. Billions in the days to come. Civilization would end. All because I followed the rules. Choice 2. I disobey. I trust my intuition, my human gut feeling that this was a mistake. I report that the system is malfunctioning, that it is a false alarm. If I am right, I have saved the world from a terrible mistake. But I have also disobeyed my most important duty. I could be arrested. I could be court-martialed, seen as a traitor who failed his country at its most critical moment. And if I am wrong, and the 5 missiles are real, then they will hit our cities. My country will be defenseless. My family, my friends, my people, they will all die. And it will be my fault, because I did not act, because I waited. The weight of the world was on my shoulders. I looked at the terrified faces of my men. I looked at the red lines on the map. I closed my eyes. 5 missiles. It makes no sense. I took a deep breath. I picked up the telephone. My heart was beating like a drum. I spoke into the receiver. My voice was steady. It did not sound like my own. "This is the command bunker," I said. "We have an alarm. Our satellite system is showing a missile launch." I paused. The man on the other end was silent, waiting. "My analysis is that this is a system malfunction. I am reporting a false alarm." I put the phone down. The silence in the room was absolute. The sirens were still blaring, but it felt like no one could hear them. They were all staring at me. In their eyes, I saw a mix of disbelief, fear, and a tiny spark of hope.
Now the waiting began. This was the hardest part. I had made my decision. I had bet the fate of the world on my intuition. Now we had to see if I was right. The missiles, if they were real, would take about 25 minutes to reach their targets. 25 minutes. It felt like a lifetime. It felt like an eternity. I watched the clock on the wall. Every tick of the second hand was a hammer blow against my heart. 1 minute passed. 2 minutes. The men were frozen at their stations. No one spoke, no one moved. We just watched, and we waited. My mind was filled with images. My wife, my children, my home, the sunlit streets of my city. All of it turned to ash and dust. All because of me. The doubt was a physical pain in my stomach. What have I done? What if I was wrong? 10 minutes passed. I looked at the ground radar screen. Still nothing, but that was expected. 15 minutes. The sweat was dripping down my face. I felt dizzy. The air was so thick I could not breathe. I wanted to scream. I wanted to pick up the phone and change my report. But it was too late. 20 minutes. Any moment now. Any moment we would know. If the missiles were real, our ground radar would pick them up now. The final confirmation. The man at the radar console was staring at his screen. He was not breathing. I looked at him. He looked back at me, and he shook his head slowly. "Nothing, Comrade Lieutenant Colonel," he whispered. "The sky is clear." 25 minutes passed. 30 minutes. There were no explosions. There were no impacts. There was only silence. The red lines on the map blinked and disappeared. The sirens stopped. The flashing red lights turned back to calm, steady green. It was over. A wave of relief washed over me. It was so powerful, my legs felt weak. I sat down heavily in my chair. I put my head in my hands. I was still shaking, but this time it was from relief. The world was safe. I had been right.
We later learned what had happened. It was an incredible, rare alignment of the sun, the clouds, and our satellite. The satellite sensors had mistaken the sunlight reflecting off the tops of high-altitude clouds for the fire of a missile launch. It was a 1 in a billion chance, a perfect storm of errors. I was not celebrated as a hero. In fact, I was questioned for many hours. I was reprimanded for not following protocol, for not writing everything down correctly in the logbook during the chaos. My career in the military was quietly ended. They moved me to a less sensitive job. No one ever spoke of that night again. For many years, the world did not know how close it came to annihilation, how a war that would have killed billions was stopped by one man in a secret room who decided to disobey. I never regretted my decision. I did not need medals or praise. My reward was the quiet knowledge that my children and your children were able to grow up in a world that still had sunrises. I learned something very important that night, deep in that concrete bunker. I learned that true courage is not always about action. It is not always about fighting or launching an attack or pressing a button. Sometimes the greatest courage in the world is to do nothing. It is to trust the small, quiet voice of humanity inside you, to question the machine, and to wait.